Now let's start creating our APIs for login and logout. When the user successfully gets logged in, we get a unique token as a response. This token is saved at the front end side in the local storage. So whenever an API has to be hit from the front end, it appends the token from the local storage and attaches to the request in the headers and forwards the request. And at the backend, Django automatically takes out the token from the headers and checks if the token is present in the database. If the token is present in the database, then it's checked for its expiry, and if the token's expiry date is in time, then that is a valid request. In this way, the backend knows which user has sent the request, and according to that, the request is processed and the response is sent back to the front end. In this project, we are not going to use the Django REST framework's token authentication. It is a very basic implementation. If you go to the documentation, these points itself says that DRF authentication can only give one token per user. Here DRF means the short form of Django REST framework. And it also suggests using Django REST Knox for better user authentication system. Knox authentication also uses DRF internally. Let's know few advantages of using Knox. It can give multiple tokens for the same user, which is helpful when the user logs in from different devices. It can also limit the number of tokens to be issued for a user. This restricts the user to log in into limited devices. DRF tokens are stored unencrypted in database, but Knox stores them in an encrypted form. Even if the attacker gets access to the database, he cannot use the tokens to log in as they are stored in encrypted form. We can also set the expiry time for the Knox tokens. Once the tokens expire, they are automatically deleted from the database and the user should log in again. The default token expiry time is 10 hours. And we can also implement logout from all devices. These points make Django REST Knox stand out from DRF authentication. Let's implement the Knox authentication in our project. Let's install Django Knox. Pip install Django-rest-knox. And now go to settings.py file, and inside installed apps we need to write Knox, and at the bottom we will declare some configurations for the Knox and also the REST framework. And here we are setting the default authentication classes to Knox. Whenever authentication happens, it is handled by the Knox. Here user serializer is the serializer which is used to serialize the user object after the login API successfully validates the user, and this serialized data is sent back in response. And token TTL is the token expiry time. Let's import time delta. Here you go. Let's create the serializer for the above. Go to the accounts app and create a serializer file. From REST framework, import serializers. And now let's apply the migrations. Knox tables have been successfully created. Go to views.py in accounts app. We will be using create API view. Serializer class would be the create user serializer. We will be creating this shortly. And permission classes would be, here in permission classes we have given allow any, which means even if the user is not logged in, he can access the API, which makes sense in case of creating a new user. And we will also write the API for updating the user. By default, if we don't give any permission classes, it requires authentication to access the API, which means a user should be logged in to update his details. Let's go to serializers.py file and create. After all the normal validations of the fields are done, then the validate method is called. In this method, we can write our custom validations. Here, the .exists method returns true if the user with the email already exists. So this is a custom validation which we are doing. And finally, return attributes. We will also override the create method. Create method is called after the validation of the data is done and we are all set to create the object. Here we are overriding it because we have a create user method in our user manager which we have created earlier. It handles the creation of users. By default, this create method inside the serializers calls the custom user.objects.create method where the password is not hashed if we use this default method. So we are overriding it. Here we will write user equal to custom user.objects.create user star validated data. We will return the user. Let's also write the update user serializer. Here instance is the custom user object. And go to views. Let's import the created serializers here. Now our APIs has been created successfully. Let's create a urls.py file inside accounts app and go to the main urls.py. Just copy this and paste here. We don't need this one. Here path create user. Let's import views from dot import views. And there is an update API as well. Now let's test our APIs in Postman. Go to Postman. I will create a new collection and name it login tutorial. Inside this I'll create a folder with name users table and we will create a request and name it as create user. The request type would be post and http://accounts/create user. And when I hit the send button, http:// here it is saying that email and gender are required fields. When I give the required field email gmail.com, gender is 1. Go to serializers.py. Here we will write extra quotes and say that password is a required field. Required equal to true. Let's hit the API again. It should give the password required error. Yes, it is giving. So I will also write the password here. 1 2 3 4. Now let's try to create an update API. Yes, we will duplicate this and rename it update user API. And here when I say update, inside accounts.urls we have to do a modification which is int::pk. Okay, now let's go to Postman and try to update the values again. We will make gender as 3. Okay, we have to change the method to put or patch. We are using patch because we are updating partially. Here you go. And if we update the password to 3456, yeah, the hash code is also being updated. Our update API is also working fine. Now let's create the login API. Go back to the code and go to views.py. Here we will create a class and say login API view. Here we have to import Knox login views. For that, we need to create the login serializer as well. So go to serializers and here we will create the login serializer. Here, the authenticate method is used to validate the credentials and returns the user object if the credentials are valid. So let's import it. Here we have to give the request object as well. Self.context get request. Self.context has the request object. Now go back to the views and import login serializer. And we have to implement the post method. Inside isValid method, we are giving raise exception equal to true, which means it directly raises the exception if the data is not valid. Here we have to import login method as well. Now go to urls.py file. Let's test the API now. Let's create a new folder. Request and it is logged in. The request method would be post and http. Copy this inside accounts /login/ and when I send, it is saying that email and password are required. In the body we will give the email, which is omkart@gmail.com, and password would be 1 2 3 4. Okay, it is saying wrong credentials. Let's go back here and check. The password is 3456. So when I write 3456, this issue is because if we go to the user and check, the is active of the user is false. In authenticate method, it also checks if the user's isActive field is true or not. For that, we have to update isActive to true, but go back to code and we need to update in serializer as well. Go back here, and when I run it, we have set isActive to true, but this is a temporary solution. We shouldn't give the isActive here. It's because this API is to update only the details of the user. IsActive is the field, only a super user can do it. To correct it, go to the models, and here just set user.isActive equal to true in the user manager in create user. So every time we are creating the user, we are by default making the isActive to true. Now go here and inside the login API, just send the request. Here you go. We have successfully logged in. When we are successfully logged in, we get a token. So whenever a request is made from any client, from the postman or the front end side, we have to send this token in the headers. So let's see how this token is going to be set in headers in the logout API. Go back to the code. Now we will create our logout API. It's very easy to create logout API. We don't need to write any code for it. Knox already implemented the logout API for us. We should only write the URLs. So go to the URLs and let's import from knox.views, import logout view, and same for the logout all view. Go to admin panel once. A new table under the Knox app is showing here. So we will open this, and here it also shows the user and the created date and the expiry. I will hit the login again. A new token is generated, and when I check in the database, another token is also given here. So this means a user can log in from multiple devices, and I will create 2 more tokens. Django. Here we have 4 tokens now. You cannot decode the token directly because if you see, this is the encrypted token, and in the response which we are getting is the unencrypted token. Now let's check the logout API. Logout also is an post API. Here I am saying logout. When I send the request directly, it says authentication credentials were not provided. Let's clean out the data in the body. We don't need to send any data in the request, and go to headers. Here we have to write the key as authorization, and the value would be token space and the token which we have got at the time of login. This is the token, and I have copied it and I have to paste it here. Before hitting the request, go to Django admin panel and refresh. Here only 4 tokens are there. Let's see what happens when we hit the logout API. 204 no content. This status is the success status. So if I go back to the Django admin panel and refresh, here you can see only 3 are there. 1 token has been deleted. This is how the logout works. Every time when a front end does a request, it has to provide the token inside the headers. When the API is hit, the Django's authentication system validates the token, and the token which is provided in the headers is present in the database or not. If the token provided is not present in the database, then it means the token is not valid or the user has been logged out. So in this way, the actual login and logout works. So we will also see what happens when we hit the logout all API. Just duplicate this. Here logout all, in headers the same token is there. If I give this, it says the invalid token because this token is not present inside the database. So let's get a new token, which is this one, and when I go to the admin panel and check, we have 4 tokens now for this omkar@gmail.com. go back to logout all API and paste the token which we have copied from the login. And when I send the request, here it returns the success response. And when I go back to Django admin panel and refresh it, here you go, there are no tokens available. So here logout all deletes all the tokens related to the same user. This says that the user has been logged out from all the devices. So when a user from the different device try to access any API, it sends the token in the request, but that token is not available in the database. So the backend sends an unauthorized status code, then the device automatically shows the login page. This is how the whole authentication process works. The difference between logout and logout all is that when logout is called, only the token which is given in the headers is deleted from the database. But when logout all is called, all the tokens of the users are deleted from the database. You can see this in the Django admin panel. We have successfully created our authentication APIs. Sometimes in interviews as a task, they ask you to implement the authentication APIs. This task was given to me in my first job interview. If you have any doubts related to this, please feel free to comment. And please follow us on our Instagram page given in the description for the latest tips and tricks on Python and Django and many more. Please subscribe us to learn more about Python and Django. Thank you.